about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love.
Welcome back to Unsolved No More. Today we're going to look at the murder of 15-year-old Donna Marie Emmel. Again, I look at cases a lot of times that nobody knows about. Again, it's not about subscribes and likes and all that bullshit. Especially with me, it's all about the victims' families, and justice, and getting the cases out there. So, I don't look at the high-profile cases all the time. This is a case that, just like the Tony Brown case that I just did, very little information out there. Now, different types of cases, because the Tony Brown case was an equivocal death, meaning we're not sure exactly what happened. If it was homicide, took his own life, or, natural death or accidental. But this is, without a doubt, a homicide. Just very little out there. You get little snippets like from, the news, but it wasn't even something that was covered much in the local newspaper. Now, this happened on June 16th, 1975. And it happened in Newport, North Carolina. I've been in contact with a family member. Now, they didn't reach out to me. This is a rare occasion when I've actually reached out to a family member and made like the first move if I was on a date, which didn't happen often. Because I started researching it, there's a really great website, and I believe it's called uncovered.com. I don't know who runs it. I sent them an email one time congratulating them on their site because I thought it was really helpful for cold cases. And they never responded, so then I got a bad taste. Whenever somebody doesn't respond to me, I get a bad taste in my mouth about that. That's just the way I operate, I guess, is how my synapses fire. I don't know. But that happened. But it didn't deter me from still visiting that site, because it has a lot of cold cases on it from different states, and just very well done. Some timelines. And I was browsing that because that's what I do. And I was looking for a case that more or less inspired me. One that was not well known, one that had some mystery, some intrigue, and one that I knew I had to get out to the public. So this is the one I chose. And the intrigue about this, and we'll get into it, is it's where she was found, but also how there's just, again, so little out there about it. So let me get into Donna Marie Emmel's case. Donna was 15. She was going from sophomore to junior year in high school. Could have that wrong, and it could have been freshman into sophomore year. But regardless, she was 15 on Monday, June 16th, 1975. Donna was a small, petite girl. I believe she's only like 5'1", 90 pounds. She was, and victimology is important, as always in any case. She is explained to be a tomboy, but a spitfire is the word that was used by her cousin. And if she got mad, look out. It's important to know. Tiny girl, though. That's also could play into some things here as we go forward. On Monday, June 16th, 1975, um, around 8 o'clock at night, Donna is spending her time at local hangouts called Grice's Grill. It's also, I believe, called American Service Grill. It could be what it was. But everybody knew it as Grice's Grill. They had pool tables, arcade games, and such. It is located, let me look at my map here, but it is located across the highway from Donna's house. Now, as you guys look at this map as well, to the left, you will see what is now, there's Bojangles, a Subway. You go further south on crossing the 9-foot road, and there's a First Citizens Bank and CVS store there. That is where Grice's Grill was. Now, if you cross the highway 70 and cross Howard Boulevard, those sections of houses there on Easy Street is where Donna lived. There's a patch of woods there as well, and I kind of drew like a crude line of a path because you can't see it here, but there was a path through those woods that kids would take to go home. It's not very far, but it does go through woods. Now, that is the path that Donna was last seen taking around 8:30 at night when her mom called Grice's Grill and said, "Hey, you have to come home." So she leaves shortly after, which is confirmed by her brother. Now, her brother is 10 years old, and he is there as well. He observes his sister, Donna, entering into this path into the woods, not far to reach her home. She had done it before many times. But on this occasion, the brother witnesses somebody going in after her. Not running after her, like chasing her, but walks that same path. It was a man, and he's described to have a blue jacket or a blue shirt at the time. Now, Donna does not make it home. This is at 8:30 at night. By 9 o'clock, Mom knows something isn't right. She should have been home. By 10 o'clock, they report her missing. They search. She is not located until the following day. The time I got is around noon. Now, once again, I want to explain how difficult it is. You're going back 50 years, but you're also you're getting information through different sources. The newspaper, which doesn't have too many exact times, and they're not always correct. And then, of course, the family member, who is 2 generations removed, for the most part, from the crime. And 50 years, obviously. So, I mean, it's very difficult, especially when they aren't told by the police specifics. This is one of a few cases that I've done where I want to say that the police did a good job of not leaking information. Again, there's not much out there. Even the family doesn't appear to know. Now, Donna's mom has since passed away. I believe she died in 1995, but don't hold that to me. Don't hold that to me. Don't hold me to that. Father, I am not sure. I know brother Michael that had seen her crossing over the highway to the path has passed away. I believe she had another brother as well. And father, again, I'm just not sure, but I know he was in the Marine Corps. And that was another motivating factor for me to look at this case and at least get it some exposure. why there isn't a lot out there, or why police are keeping certain things close to a vest, I understand. But I also know that after so much time, and it hasn't worked. 50 years, whatever you're doing, police, NCIC, I guess who has the case now, or whatever it is, it's not working. So you have to be proactive, not reactive. Okay? Reactive is you're sitting at your desk and you're waiting for a phone call to come in for somebody to confess about Donna. And it's not going to happen. It hasn't happened in 50 years. So what do? We got to be proactive, meaning you go back out and you interview people, or you start releasing some information that hasn't been released. So with that being said, Donna's body is found at noon in a ditch right across the street from her home. Now, when you hear that, there's many connotations that could come to mind. One being, okay, when I first heard it, I looked at a picture like this. You go to Google Street View. Well, all right across the street, I see a drainage ditch, like right beside the road. So naturally, I assume that that's where she's found. And I start thinking, who would kill somebody and place her in a ditch right across from her house where she's in full view? Okay. When you're thinking like that, if that's the case, you're thinking of a complete different type of personality of the offender versus the reality. And the reality I had to get from, I believe it was Donna's cousin, was that no, she was found here. There's a ditch back here in those woods across the street from her house. Okay. Now that makes more sense to me. I also got information from the family that, and I believe I read it in newspaper reports as well, was that she was killed elsewhere and then placed in that ditch. Now immediately, again, my mind goes to a different place. When a body is purposely killed somewhere else, a person is murdered somewhere else, and then placed at another location. Happens all the time, okay? It's not like that's abnormal. But to be placed right across from your very own house, now that is abnormal. So now my mind is, okay, the offender. The offender wants her to be found. There is some sort of significance by placing her there in a ditch. And the information I got was she was placed in a ditch like she was tucked in to bed, that she was sleeping. Now again, that brings up very different imaging for me. Okay, does she have a blanket on her? Is she laying on her back? All those details are extremely important in trying to assess who the offender could be. I've learned that no, she doesn't have a blanket on her. She's laid on her side. Now, that kind of bothered me a little bit because, yes, you do see that. But usually when you're dragging somebody or you're carrying them and you place them somewhere, the more than, I don't know what the statistics are, but it's usually on their back. Here I'm told she's on the side. Now listen, you have to, you don't take it with a grain of salt, the information that you receive, right? You're happy to receive it, but regardless of the intent of the family that's giving you information, you don't know personally whether that information is true. The most truth that you are going to get is if you see it with your own eyes. Meaning, you find Donna's body in the ditch. You see, okay? She's on her side. Arms are up, arms are down, arms are out. Hair is flared back, hair is tucked in. All very crucial to your assessment. Now, why, you say, Kenny? Well, because it gives you a different offender. Example, if her hair is flared out, okay, she's laying on her back and her hair is up here. Well, what does that tell you? It tells you she was dragged to that position. Even if there's no drag marks, you can infer that she was drugged to that position because of her hair. And she was drugged how? Not by her arms, by her feet. In addition, that is different than if her hair is tucked underneath her. Because then you can infer that she was carried. Now, why does that matter? Well, you're looking at an offender, right? Maybe not in this case because she weighed 90 pounds. But let's say she weighed 150 pounds. That is a lot of weight for a normal person to carry. Dead weight, no pun intended. So you could almost rule out a female. Listen, can we rule out a female in this homicide? No, you can't. Not based on the information that we have right now. And that is why details of how she was found are very important. Now, what I want to know is, why do police believe she was killed elsewhere and then moved there? Is it because of one of the things that I said about her hair? Is it because they had searched that very ditch that night and she wasn't there? That's one of the reasons I believe. From the family, I got that mom had searched that ditch that night and she wasn't there. Now, I'm certainly not going to dispute what mom is saying. But I will say I have seen cases where a body was missed. And again, people will say that no way, the body was not there, it was moved and placed there. An example to me would be Donna Emmel, Alonzo Brooks. Now, yes, it's possible that a body is moved to that location, but I would say I'm strongly, at least in this case, I would say I don't believe that, and I'll get into more reasons why. Again, it's all about deduction. Deducing possibilities to probabilities. Hey, once you get to a probability, that doesn't mean that that's the end answer, because there's always outliers, right? But statistically, the most probable answer is that. Doesn't mean that it can't be this either. Okay? So, I asked the family, why do police believe this? And of course, the standard answer is always, well, the police aren't telling us much. But in this case, Donna's body seemed to be covered in sand. See how each new detail is a new lead? And as a detective, that's all you ever want, is to have another lead. It makes you smile. It makes you get a feeling, well, at least I do, get a feeling of renewed hope. Okay, this is something. It's tangible. You can taste it. It's like, okay. So this is a new lead for me. Sand. Okay, well, we are in North Carolina. I lived in North Carolina for 4 years. I lived on Onslow Beach when I was in the Marine Corps. I'm well versed in sand. North Carolina has a lot of it. When I checked this area of Newport, a beach is within 10 miles of this location. There's a lake that I saw in an overhead map, which I'm sure probably has sand near it as well. Now, I don't know what the soil is like on this path through the woods. Now, I'm going to guess that there's some sand there. But if that's a reason that police are saying, you can't just discount everything that a detective did back in 1975. Listen, I can say unequivocally, they weren't just like, no, all right, it's another dead human. Let's go out, photograph it, let's go home, eat some chili. No. A lot of people think that that's what occurs. Like they didn't care. I promise you, they cared. But maybe they didn't have the resources to follow up. Okay? Maybe they weren't equipped. Maybe they weren't that good of a detective. Maybe. But maybe they were. And they just couldn't figure it out. Listen, I think I'm a pretty good detective. Okay? I'm not the best there is. But I had a case that I couldn't figure out. 10 years I worked on it. And I promise you, I worked on that case harder than anybody. And yeah, I did my standard deductions. I deduced possibilities, probabilities, and I got down here. But it didn't lead me to one single offender. You know, it led me to 3. Out of those 3, I couldn't deduce any further to say this is the one. I was stuck with those 3. So I failed. It wasn't from a lack of effort. Same thing with this investigation. Maybe they tried and they just couldn't figure it out. Maybe they didn't work hard. I don't know. But I'm guessing I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And if they say the reason we believe that she was killed elsewhere is because sand on the body, me looking at it 50 years later has to give it some weight, some credence, and say, okay, well, they believed it back then. Let's at least entertain it. Let's explore it and see if it's palpable. With all that said, I don't find it palpable. There's got to be more reasoning there. Now, the exact words that I got was they felt that she was killed at a nearby road, placed in a shed, and then placed in the ditch. Now, as you look at this map, she is found right by this shed. Now, I don't believe that they're talking about this shed that's right next to it, but there has to be a reason why they've come up with a theory like that. You know what I mean? I don't believe that just to be rumored throughout the years because it's very specific. A shed. She was stored in a shed. Yet, much like to me right now, it had to be to them where they thought, I'm hoping they thought this. Wait a second. That doesn't make sense. Unless they have specific evidence pointing to her being killed elsewhere and then placed in that shed. Meaning, what if they found she was strangled? Okay. But what if the offender punched her in the nose and she had a bloody nose? and the public doesn't know about that. But during the course of their investigation, they went to a shed and was searching for a body, and they found, drops of blood. And they tested. Back in 1975, they're not testing it for DNA. They'll test the blood type. And let's say it was blood type A. And Donna had blood type A. And it was within 2 miles of where her body's located. Okay, they are making an inference saying that more than likely is Donna's blood, and we believe that she was stored there. Now, for 1975, okay, I guess it kind of makes sense. Me as an investigator, I guess, hindsight being 2020, I would be like, well, we don't know that. Obviously, that's her blood, right? I would think that there might be more. But based off of everything that I know, and it's very limited, I like to say that the most plausible answer is usually the right answer. Meaning this. What do we know for sure? We know that Donna left at around 8:30 p.m., crossed the highway into those woods on that path, and she was followed by somebody. We know that her body was found right off of that path, that path, according to the family, led right to that ditch, and her body was found there. To me, more likely than not, she would have been killed in that patch of woods very close to that ditch. And that's where she was placed. Now, why do you place her in the ditch and not leave her? Okay, more than likely, now I don't know if that ditch is visible with the naked eye from any of those houses. That makes a big difference. If it's hidden in the wood line, I would say that more than likely she's placed in there to conceal the body. She is not killed in that ditch. One account that I read from, I believe her friend had written a blog post back in 2008 that I found online. She said there was a foot of water in that ditch. Well, if that ditch is visible from the road, from Easy Street, from the houses, I don't think she was murdered in the ditch. Okay? I believe she was placed in that ditch, but she was killed in that wooden section. That is what makes sense to me. Now, I know that goes against apparently what the police are saying. But look at this map again. There are no roads for a vehicle to travel down this path. It's not like you could get in a car and drive through those woods. It's a footpath. How would you transport a body there? Meaning, okay, let's go with this theory that she was killed, let's say, on a beach, 12 miles away. First of all, the offender has to get her there. Now, how does that occur? She's last seen going into those woods, just minutes from her house. And she's found in those woods minutes from her house. How would an offender, he would have to, let's say it's the guy in the blue shirt that's followed her in there, which I believe more than likely was the offender. So let's say he follows her in there and somehow he produces a weapon. and abducts her. Now, he's got two choices. He either has to come back out the way that they went in, where he would have a car parked near Howard Boulevard, and put her in there, which is possible. I'm not going to say it's probable, but it's possible. Or he would have a vehicle parked on Easy Street, which is less plausible, right? Because he entered off of Howard Boulevard. What's he going to do? Park on Easy Street, walk all the way around Howard Boulevard? It doesn't make sense. There's too many houses on Easy Street that they would notice a vehicle being parked in that little cul-de-sac or driveway or whatever it is. So let's say he does somehow abduct her, walks her forcefully back out to Howard Boulevard, puts her in his vehicle, and let's say now he drives her to a secluded location which happens to have sand, like a beach, and he murders her. She gets sand all over her because he strangles her in the sand. You're going to tell me now that he's going to place that body back into his vehicle. He's going to have to drive either to Howard Boulevard or off of Highway 70 there, or park again somewhere on Easy Street, walk that body. Now, it's going to be dark out, and the moon is a waning gibbons, which means it's not full anymore. It's starting to shrink again. So there is some visibility. It got dark, completely dark, at 8:58 that night. The sun set at 8:27 p.m. So he's doing this all in the dark. He's going to carry that body. If he does it on Easy Street, he's going to walk right past Donna's house, who are already searching for her, and place her in that ditch, get back in his car and leave. Or he parks on Highway 70 or Howard Boulevard, carrying her dead weight body, 90 to 100 pounds, all the way through that wooden path, almost to Donna's house, gets to the edge of the woods, places her body in a ditch, and then walk back out. Does that make sense to any of you? If it does, I will stop short of calling you an idiot. But I will say that I would not want you investigating anything with me. Because that makes zero sense. Now, let me ask you this. It's 8:30. Donna is leaving Grice's Grill, crosses the interstate, crosses Howard Boulevard, enters into the path to which she's taken before. She is going into the woods. It's just getting dark. A male follows her into those woods, and she is found the next day in those woods. Is it more probable that she was killed in those woods? If you answered yes to that, then I would like you on my investigative team, because you have what's called common sense. Now, the particulars of what happened in those woods, I don't know. I think only two people know. Donna and the offender. But I will say that I'm fairly confident, unless there's evidence out there that I don't know about, that she was killed in those woods, because that makes sense. You're not transporting a body, a dead weight, through those woods and placing her across the street from her house. It just doesn't make sense. Now, I keep going through different scenarios to have that make sense, because you don't want to be closed-minded in an investigation, especially when you have information that it happened. So if police are saying she was killed elsewhere and placed there, in my mind, okay, well, you have to entertain that, Kenny. Let's think about how that could happen. if she made it home, made it to Easy Street, and she met her demise somewhere on that side of the woods, and she's killed on that side, and somebody then places her in that ditch, I can entertain that. Okay? That I can entertain. But what I think that does then is then that eliminates, for me, the guy that walks behind her in the woods. And by all intent and purposes, I feel like that is most likely the offender. Because if it was somebody that lived on Easy Street who was taking that shortcut, I think he would have came forward, or people would have known him. Well, yeah, that was Johnny. He lives 4 houses down from Donna. And his parents said, yeah, he came home. Nothing abnormal. They would look at him, obviously, as a potential suspect, but then probably rule him out. Now, if Johnny was a suspect, then that scenario where she's placed in the ditch would make sense. Saying Johnny is on his way home, the same as Donna. He lives on Easy Street. Him and Donna get into a altercation of some sort. He strangles her, places her in the ditch, and then goes home. I buy that. But she is not really murdered in a different location. It's not like she made it to another house on Easy Street. Let's say Johnny's house. Johnny kills her in his house, and he says, okay, well, I can't leave her body here, so I have to get rid of it. Logically, him taking it to the woods and placing it into the ditch away from his house would make sense. That I can get behind that. But I am sure that they interviewed. Doesn't mean they missed the offender, but I think somebody would know who that is. Does that make sense to me? Or to you? Because I feel, to me, the offender is the person that followed her in there. And I think that everybody believes that. But for that offender to abduct her there, take her somewhere else and kill her and bring her back makes 0 sense. 0 cents. Let me say that again. 0 cents. If you're of the belief, well, an offender would do that. Let's say for shock value. Let's say because the offender had remorse and he cared and he wanted her to be found. Well, if that's the case, why didn't the offender just take her up and put her on the porch of her house? Dead. There, she's going to be found. I care about her. Right? Put her in the yard. But you're still concealing her in the ditch. And that is why she's found in the ditch. Make no mistake about it. She wasn't killed in that ditch. Police would have said that. You know, there would have been, if there's water in that ditch and she's strangled in the ditch, there would be scuff marks from her fighting everywhere in that ditch. Mud would be caved in. That didn't happen. So she was placed there. And the only reason you place her into a ditch is to conceal a body. Now, how else do I know this? Well, because if an offender just wanted to conceal the body with a pick and a shovel, like if she was killed somewhere else, he would just, and he wanted to conceal the body, and this was premeditated, and he had all this time, he would bury the body because he's concealing it into a ditch, right? He doesn't use a pick. He doesn't use a shovel because there's no time. It happened right there in the woods. The boy, her brother, didn't see him going in there with a pick and a shovel, right? So he goes in there. Whatever happens, he kills her. He strangles her. And her body is on that path. he purposely moves her body from that path to the ditch to conceal it. He doesn't want it found. And he can't bury her. He has no equipment. He has to get out of there. That's what I see. Nothing else makes sense to me. It doesn't make sense that she's killed somewhere. The sand, if that is true, I would say that the most logical explanation is there's sand back there on that path, in the soil somewhere, or it's transfer. I don't know how the amount. When they say she's covered in sand, well, I need to know the details of that. Was it in her hair? Was it just found on the front of her body? Was it, what was it? What's the amount when you say covered in sand? Because it could be transfer, come from the offender, which is another lead, right? Okay, well, he lives on the beach. He works on the beach, something. I find it, I want to know why the police say she was killed elsewhere and placed in that ditch. It makes no sense to me. Now, get back to, if the reason is because mom said she searched that ditch that night and she wasn't there, I can believe that. Now, she could have missed her, okay? But I would rather take her word for it and say she searched it. It's very possible that the offender moved the body into the ditch. She could have been killed on that path. And after dark, after the guy left, he comes back and places her in that ditch because he knows that she's going to be found. I relate that to the Dawn Miller case that I worked, and that's exactly what I believe happened. The offender, Greg Emmel, and his nephew killed Dawn, strangled her, beat her to death on a pretty popular trail, hiking trail. And they hastily buried her there. But they went back the next day because they knew, hey, we didn't bury her well. She's going to be found. People are on that hiking trail, so we have to move her. And that was confirmed to me 20 years later when cadaver dogs alerted at that spot, and we dug and there was nothing there. And that's where one of the offenders took me and said we buried her there, but the other one came back and moved her. I think that has some elements here where he could have killed her near that path. Doesn't have to be right on the path, because I believe mom would have checked that path. Okay, hey, that's the last she was seen. Of course they're going to walk that path, and didn't see her. Now, it makes sense to me that the offender and her got into an altercation. She tried to run, whatever it is, and she was killed off of that path. But when daylight comes, you're going to see, as you're walking that path and you're scanning, you're going to see her body over here, right? So the offender is saying, hey, she's going to be found. I need to buy more time. I'm going to come back and I'm going to drag her into that ditch. To me, that's very possible. That makes more sense to me than her being killed at another location and then risk bringing her back and being seen by the very people that are looking for her. That doesn't make sense to me. All right, I'm going to go over my template here. Dawn Marie Emmel, age 15. Grice Grill, Newport, North Carolina. I didn't talk about the suspects in this case because I just don't know if there was a suspect that was a Marine, he had been convicted of some sexual assaults in other locations. He was stationed near this area. Apparently had visited Grice Grill. Yes, very, very possibly could have been him. But what we have to look at is not a common thread, but I guess MO. I guess that would make sense. Meaning he sexually assaulted these other women, okay? Donna was not sexually assaulted. Now, just because she was not sexually assaulted does not mean that this is not a sexually motivated crime. Okay? I think of the Brandy Peltz case. Was she, I forget how old she was, maybe 10. She was murdered in a bathtub or placed in a bathtub after she was strangled. To me, it was a sexually motivated crime. Even though they said she wasn't sexually motivated. If an offender is impotent, meaning he is unable to get or maintain an erection, and a lot of times those offenders will have a power, a control type of need to satisfy themselves. BTK had this problem. So sometimes you're not going to see that the victim is sexually assaulted. Therefore, you say, well, it's not a sexually motivated crime, when in fact it is. Because if you look at greed, sex, or revenge, the three main categories that murders fall under, in my opinion, here, I mean, she's 15. Could it be greed? Meaning somebody was robbing her. Yeah, I guess. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I think we could get rid of greed. Revenge. Is somebody mad at her? Okay, that is possible. But at age 15, you're not making a lot of enemies yet. You're not 50 like me and have everybody hate you because of you being able to speak the truth. You're 15. When I was 15, I know I didn't have a lot of enemies. So, to me, you could almost rule out revenge. Jealousy falls under revenge as well. And we're left with sex. Okay? I believe that this was a sexually motivated crime based off of the information that I see. Even though she wasn't sexually assaulted. Doesn't mean that the offender's fantasy is that, hey, I've been thinking about this for a long time and I'm finally going to implement it. And you implement it, and in your fantasy, you walk up to her, ask her for directions. She's smitten on you just like that. You start kissing, you have sex in the woods. Maybe that's the fantasy, okay? But something goes wrong. You go up to her, and she's like, "Get off of me, what are you doing?" And the fantasy goes awry. And you kill her. And there is no actual penetration. There's no nothing. It's a freak out. It's, hey, it didn't go the way I planned. Or maybe he goes up to her and his fantasy is violence. I'm going to grab her. I'm going to start choking her. I'm going to rape her. And he does that and she fights back. And she fights back harder than what he thought. And he can't fulfill the fantasy. And he freaks out. She screamed. He's got to get out of there. He kills her. He runs after he kills her. Or maybe he's impotent and he can't get it up. And his fantasy is, and his gratification is strangling her, watch the life come out of her body, and he gets off just like that. And he's satisfied. Now, as an investigator, how are you going to know if this is a sexually motivated crime or not? Now, I would expect for her clothing to be disheveled in some sort of way, meaning her breast exposed when she was found or her pants pulled down. I don't know if any of that had happened. I don't know that. All I know is she was placed in this ditch. So I can't rule out revenge, jealousy, but the man following her is what makes me rule that out. It makes me believe it was a sexually motivated crime. And that goes back to this other couple of offenders, especially one that was stationed there and was a Marine. I think they both were. But they actually went through with the assaults, meaning they sexually assaulted them, these other victims. And that didn't happen here. So it gives me pause to point fingers at them. Doesn't mean it wasn't them. It certainly was somebody that was a sexual predator, in my opinion. And maybe it wasn't a serial sexual offender. Listen, not every homicide is done by a serial offender, whether it's a serial rapist or a serial killer. No, it's just not. But whoever did this, I believe, had eyes on that grill and was waiting for somebody, maybe not Donna, but he was waiting for somebody to leave. Almost as if he was hunting. Now, Dennis Rader talked about that as well. You would troll looking for victims. To me, it's not an opportunistic crime, meaning, I'm just driving by and I see her, and so I'm going to get out. No, it's premeditated. It's somebody had familiar... They didn't have to know that path was there. Okay? But I am very sure that they knew that grill was there and that was a hangout. So the offender doesn't have to be from that immediate area. It's on a busy highway. At least the highway's busy now. I can imagine it was probably one of the only thoroughfares between the two Marine Corps bases. So as much as I hate to say, because of the Marine in me, that the offender could be a Marine, the chances are very good being between two Marine Corps bases, but you have a lot of others in there as well. So you don't focus in on the Marines. But it's somebody that knew about that girl being there and know that there were teenagers there. And they were waiting for an opportunity. And the opportunity presented itself. So, very difficult to assess. It really is. Without more information. I wish I had the police reports. Or at least knew more details. I wish the mom was still alive. That I could talk to her. And find out specifics. Again, with the hair flared, how clothing disheveled, was she wet, how much sand, all those things that, people might think they know the answers to, but they really don't because they're hearing it fourth or fifth hand. That's why police reports are so important. Because you write them down the day of the murder and they don't change. They're locked away. So when you want to know the facts, 50 years later, you go back and you pick it up and there they are. Donna left the path, or left the grill, entered the path through the woods to go home. Witness was her brother. Man followed her. I have a star next to that because obviously that's important. Timeline. 8:30, mom calls the grill. She leaves. 9 o'clock, she's not there. 10 o'clock, she's reported missing. 12 o'clock p.m. the next day, the body's found. One of the questions that I had here was, why was Donna summoned home and the brother wasn't? Donna's 15. It's 8:30 at night. Mom calls to get her home. But the brother, who is 10 years old, is still there. That troubled me a little bit. I have that written down here as a red flag. What's the reasoning? You know what I mean? That doesn't make sense that the younger brother is allowed to stay. Did Donna get in trouble? That's important to know. The offender would not take her somewhere else, kill her and bring her back. Doesn't make sense. Drainage ditch on Easy Street across from her home. Agreed sex revenge. Are the clothes intact? Sunset at 8:28 p.m. that night, and it was fully dark by 8:57. See, I wanted to know the moon phase. I wanted to know when it got dark, because between 8:30 at night and 9 o'clock, that's when the murder occurred. So you have a 30-minute window there. Was it fully dark? Could the offender see in an area that he may not be familiar with, or not? So that, and I wanted to know that for the search parties. Who went out that night to look for her? Certainly mom, dad, probably brother. Could they see? What was the visibility? Red flag: strangled, not sexually assaulted. Killed in a nearby road and placed in a shed, then moved, ? Sand covering the body, transfer. The Peltz case, I have written down here. She's placed in the ditch to conceal the body. Wasn't transported. Path goes right to the ditch. A car can't get to that ditch. So how are you transporting the body? Sure, you could throw it up over your shoulders and carry her, certainly, but you're not coming back to the scene of the crime to put the body. It just doesn't make sense. That's it. That's all I have on this case. It's a case that I think needs more attention, and hopefully, this will give it that. And hopefully there'll be some people that reach out to me with some information and we can revisit it. That's one of the things that I love about doing this, is I do a case. Deborah Makel was a case, and I'll link that at the end of this, where information has come to me afterwards that I find relevant, and I'm able to pass that on. That's what it's about. It's about getting these cases out there. And for people, her mom, her dad, Semper Fi, you know what I mean? The pain that they go through. Sometimes people don't understand because it doesn't affect them. A lot of people, if it doesn't affect them, they don't care. Just be like you're at a restaurant and you look out in the parking lot and somebody shoots somebody else. Yeah, you're in a panic, try to protect your kids, whatever. You go home, you tell people about it, but then police end up calling you because they find out you're at the restaurant and you're like, I didn't see anything. It doesn't affect you. So you don't want to get involved. Although your eyewitness testimony could very well put the offender in jail so he doesn't hurt anybody else and give closure to the victim. But instead, you don't say anything because you don't want to get involved. It doesn't affect you. You're going to go on with your daily life. And then that mom and that dad and that brother and that sister have to deal with that heartache of a cold case now for the rest of their lives. It's not fair. So if you know something, you stand up and you say it. You're a man. Be a man. Don't be afraid. This world has too many cowards in it already. Don't be one. Stand up. Be a man. Say what you saw. Let people know. And don't just care about yourself. Care about these victims and the families. Hope this helps somebody. And if information comes to me, I will pass it on to the appropriate sources and law enforcement and hopefully get some closure. In this case, very sad case for a very pretty girl, Donna Marie Emmel, who missed growing up, and doing all the things that she could do in her life. And that's sad. It's the reality. I get it. I deal with it all the time, but it's sad. So, with that said, thanks for watching. Main's out.